absolutely. And
Good for the mind.
good for everything. So what's up with you? Anything good going on with you?
Well, looks like we might be moving back to Oregon. To be
What?
determined. We'll see. Anyway,
What that
too early to provide details, but
okay.
it's in
Oh,
in process stage.
in process.
So
All
yeah,
right. Well, I guess as the temperatures head toward 121. That
yeah.
yeah.
They've actually dipped down below 100, having been over 100 for a week or two, and so now that the first full day of summer's arrived, it should be a little less than 100 for the peak temp today.
But
It's
at
all
night,
good.
it cools off at night pretty quickly.
Oh, well, it by first thing in the morning, it's very pleasant. So I go walking. I usually head out the door about 5 this time of the year. So
Yeah.
it's very nice actually.
All right. So you're here with Bruce Rawles and Lynn Johnson, and we are reading Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles. And we're getting into some exciting stuff. This particular section, which is called her, what is it called? You look here real quick on the Catholicism, Mary. So, and then we're going to be reading about her ambivalence towards Jesus. But right now we're reading about Mary, and just read that she would say the rosaries a lot.
Mhm.
So
Pocket full of posery, right?
I know, yeah, exactly. You're right. I think that's where that came from. I'm not sure. Well, I have no
I
idea really, but makes sense. All right. So, do you want to read or you want me to read?
um I can start. Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, in addition to Helen's interest in the church, which is kind of what you just summarized in the previous paragraph, and having a little pocket rosary, she loved the way the Bible was written, but didn't care a bit what it says. Basically, I'm paraphrasing what Ken has said many times, including in this book. She thought the language was very lovely and poetic, and yet was very mixed about what it said. But she'd like to attend services and do the rosary. So anyway, resumes with, in addition, Helen knew the Bible very well and could quote passages from it almost as readily as she could from Shakespeare. She was most familiar, of course, with the New Testament, but also felt at home with the more well-known books and verses from the Old Testament, especially Isaiah and the Psalms. As would be expected, on one level, Helen's attraction for the Bible was due to the beautiful Elizabethan language of the King James Version, the only translation she knew. On another level, the Bible, the Old Testament prophecies, supposedly relating to Jesus in the New Testament, was this so-called testimony that related accounts of Jesus, and so herein lay her underlying attraction to it. At the same time, of course, her love-hate relationship with Jesus, not to mention with traditional Christianity, was projected onto its books. So for Helen, the Bible was both a literary masterpiece as well as being a symbolic reminder of Jesus, thereby making it subject to the same ambivalence she felt for him. The negative side of her ambivalence toward the Bible and Christianity or Roman Catholicism did not always show. However, I remember one time when it did. Helen was helping me to edit my pamphlet, Christian Psychology and A Course in Miracles. This pamphlet was written in 1977 to assist identified Christians to bridge the gap between their religious understanding and the Course. Thus, it quoted frequently from the Bible in explaining the Course's principles, and referred as well to some of the traditional Christian beliefs. One section in the pamphlet consisted of a re-examination of quotations from the New Testament in light of the Course teachings. I have rarely seen Helen so furious. Reading passages brought up so much anger in her, it was impressive even to me, who had already frequently observed Helen at her, quote, worst, unquote. All the repressed anger at the churches which purported to teach the gospel of Jesus and yet in truth corrupted it, flared up. This was not an issue that Helen usually related to, but it obviously was there. Even deeper, of course, was Helen's own guilt, stemming from her self-accusations over having also not been faithful to Jesus. Well, there you go. Once again, Lynn, as we read this, I'm reminded that it's not just about Helen.
No,
It's about
absolutely.
everyone's ambivalence, including all of us who read it. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Even deeper, of course, was Helen's own guilt stemming from her self-accusations over uh, having also not been faithful to Jesus. The disappointment, rage, and hatred at Jesus for his, quote, broken promises, unquote, that Helen usually kept below the surface, although barely, in parentheses, suddenly flared up wildly, and she lashed out at him for not living up to his word. Hmm. Of course, his word being probably distorted pretty heavily in the Bible in lots of
Well,
places.
I'm also thinking it like she felt she believed that somehow or the other this connection with Jesus was going to make her happy
Right.
and give her peace, and that she was not experiencing peace and happiness, I think was really troubling to her, as it is to everyone. Listen, how many people have said, if how could Helen have had this relationship with Jesus and been so unhappy? Well, duh. Uh, look at yourself. You
Well,
know,
exactly. And if you think about it, if the course's message is true, then every one of us is, in truth, you know, connected to, intimately connected to and representative of the Christ mind, although we may not reflect that. So to take issue with anyone, including the author of this book, um, which isn't really a person, it's really a part of our mind, is to take issue with the sanity that is trying to keep us from the misery of our own self-inflicted insanity, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So we're arguing with ourselves. Quite
Mhm.
basically, it's just the war against myself that is just going
Yeah, yeah,
over and over and over. And Helen was
yep.
at war with herself because we all know, well, maybe we don't all know, but I've come to the pretty clear conclusion that that is the same exact Christ voice that's within all of us, and that every
Mhm.
single one of us has the same thing going on. Uh, it, the only difference is that Helen saw it as a different person telling her something. It's like did you ever get into or see bicameralism, the bicameral mind? This thought, that idea that because we have two brains, our brain is split. Um, that when the one brain in ancient man was speaking to the other brain, ancient man was interpreting it as a voice from outside of them, and therefore invented God. I mean, that's kind of the long and short of it there. Uh, but I mean, there's a whole science of it, and there's been a lot of research into it, because there is, what is the purpose of having two brains that both actually could work independent of the other for most functions? Of course, because we have the cerebellum and other parts that do things, but but the actual uh, the chatting that goes on between the left brain and the right brain uh, is where some scientists have said, this is where your idea of God comes from, or your idea of Helen's idea of um, Jesus talking to her. Um, thinking that it came from outside of herself. But this is all something that's inherent in this. I think what do you call it? The introduction of the workbook lessons this time says something about that. Like this is something you know and you've always known. You've
Hmm.
always known it. You have just not recognized it. You're not willing to admit the connection. And so God is but love, therefore so am I. I and the Father are one. Doesn't connect with us. Um, so she was expecting this other figure to give her something or do something for her that was going to bring about peace. And all really that happened was that she became angrier and angrier because she
Hmm.
was expecting something that wasn't, uh, it couldn't give her. Uh, because she already has it. Anyway, so it just interests me that she would just like get flared up and angry about it, and be angry at the church and angry at Jesus and angry, my goodness. I mean, I've been angry at the church myself, quite a bit, um, because it pretty much runs the whole gamut of domination uh, culture. But uh, that I mean, I can understand how she was feeling this way, uh, but I never recognized that I was, angry with God too for not living up to what His promises are. No,
Well,
not
that's
living,
obviously projecting our
right,
expectations as
projecting my
promises
expectations.
onto the
That's right.
world, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I expect
Yeah.
to have peace. I expect to be in joy. Hey, it's your fault. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, continue reading.
Okay, okay, that's all good. Um, so let's see. The church likewise, though somewhat secondarily, received its share of abuse for its confusion of form and content, trapping its believers in a web of ritual and dogma. These feelings expressed toward Jesus were not too dissimilar from what is found in some of Helen's poems that I discuss later in this chapter, though they lacked the more controlled expression that is contained in the poetry. Her rage this time even kept her up through the night, Helen later told me, as she could not quiet her hurt and vengeful mind. Yeah, I think there's, anything that seems to be the cause of our lack of peace is suitable for projection. And not that it ever works, but that's, the ego mind will glom onto anything that it can find. And if we've had a religious upbringing that hasn't delivered the goods, that becomes a suitable target along with everything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's can be spread out to everything. My parents, the government, uh, my teachers at school, everybody I
Hmm.
expected were going to do something for me that um, I thought they, for some reason were responsible for. And the reality of it is, you know, it, it's all self-inflicted.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
continue on. Yeah.
very much self-inflicted. Okay, let's see. Um,
Nonetheless,
oh, yeah, I finished the paragraph, didn't I? Okay. Nonetheless, for the most part, Helen's conscious relationship to the church was a positive, for the most part, was a positive one. I've already indicated Helen's affection for Father Michael, shared by all of us. During one period of our friendship, Michael would pick Bill up once a week at his apartment, early in the morning, drive to the medical center, where Helen and I would meet them. Michael would then say Mass in Helen's office for the four of us. While Bill was the least comfortable with religious rituals of any kind, let alone a Catholic Mass, he, along with Helen and me, enjoyed this peaceful time of intimate sharing. Incidentally, Michael departed somewhat from the traditional by having me choose the Mass readings instead of following the daily church liturgical schedule. Thus, the quote, epistle, unquote, came from the course, with the gospel selection following the same theme found in the course reading. Every once in a while, we would gather in my apartment for Mass, and then a light supper for which Louis usually joined us after Mass. Uh, Michael's obvious sincerity and devotion to God was the content with which we joined, since we did not subscribe to the Catholic dogma that the bread and wine literally became the body and blood of Jesus. Helen used to joke with Michael about this and say, "After all, Mike, bread is bread." But I suggested to Helen that perhaps she not kid him like this, since the Mass was quite serious and real for him. Michael was close to Mother Teresa, and whenever she came to New York, he chauffeured her around at the request of the Cardinal. On a number of occasions, Michael arranged for us to meet with her. Once even at our offices at the medical center, and Helen and she shared a mutual respect. Mother Teresa was particularly struck by Helen's work with retarded children, and assertively told Helen one winter that next year she, Helen, would be in India, lending her talents on behalf of the poor children. Mother Teresa may have caused bishops to quake when she came to their dioceses. Dioceses? Is that how you say it?
Diocese.
Um, okay, yeah, and and had Jesus on her side to boot, but not even she could get Helen to do something she chose not to do, nor could Jesus, as we have seen. Thus, even saints can be mistaken. Oh, that's funny.
Oh,
Uh,
funny.
there's a there's a footnote here in my printed version on the bottom of page 427. It says, in the original dictation of the course, Jesus made several comments to Helen about the Eucharist. Quote, the idea of cannibalism in connection with the blessed, in brackets, sacrament is a reflection of a distorted view of sharing. I told you before that the word thirst, in quotes, in connection with the Spirit was used in the Bible because of the limited understanding of those to whom I spoke. I also told you not to use it. I do not want to share my body in communion because this is to share nothing. I think that's almost verbatim from the Course. Would I try to share an illusion with the most holy children of a most holy Father? But I do want to share my mind with you. Yet would I offer you my body, you whom I love, knowing its littleness? Or would I teach that bodies can keep us apart? Mine was of no greater value than yours. Communion comes with peace, and peace must transcend the body. So I think almost all that's almost verbatim from the Course. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I just again find it fascinating that they would put the because obviously Helen knew because we're just reading about it. Um, Obviously Helen knew that that was not he was not really turning in the mass. I don't know if people are who are not Catholic understand what supposedly happens in the mass, but the mass is sort of like a magic act where the priest through these chanting and praying and doing these particular motions and movements change or arrange these wafers, this kind of like um, fish food kind of wafer.
Not a
But
silicon wafer that
no
is
wafer,
the
wafer
basis of a
kind of,
microprocessor.
no, like those, they're kind of like those wafer cookies that have
Yeah,
cream
I
rolls and
actually even in a Protestant church, I've had the little crackers
a little, yeah,
and
yeah.
grape juice many decades ago when my mom was dragging us around to all the churches she could find, until finally giving up on that whole idea.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, so actually you're supposed to be changing these wafers into the body of Christ
Hmm.
and this wine into the blood of Christ, which is when Jesus in the Last Supper said, this is my body, take this and eat. This is my body, take this and drink. This is my blood. You know, this was like this whole little ceremony that went on. And so that's what the priest is doing also is this little ceremony. And then, you know, we're all getting up and eating and drinking Jesus's flesh and blood, which uh, I just find it fascinating because that's actually the basic purpose of the mass, is to get up to that point where you get communion, but before that you got to be read to and prayed for and prayed from, and you got to say all the right words back and forth between you and the priest, and it's a whole little it's a beautiful ceremony. I love it. It's just
So,
and it's just
so it's basically a very sanitized version of Jeffrey Dahmer and Dracula, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, except for Jesus is still alive.
Apologies to anyone
I
who
know
finds
that's
us
terrible.
this, as Ken was saying, try, probably best not to
No,
offend
yeah,
people that
got to
find
take
meaning,
that
because
life.
and that's not the point. It's just silly because again, everything we do in this world is a cannibalistic thing. I was thinking about that, watching three young hawks pick over a carcass of something. Went out for my walk this morning. I was thinking, well, everything's cannibalistic here. I mean, every body eats other bodies. Whether it's
That's right.
a carrot or a mouse or
Oh,
a
funny.
whale.
The other night I was cooking dinner, and as I was cooking dinner, I was chopping vegetables and stuff, and I was imagining, what if an alien who had not like alien from another world, not from, some other country, but from another world, was here in my kitchen with me and watching me do this, and and I'm explaining to them, here we eat living things. We only eat things that were alive at one time. Sometimes we eat things that are still alive, like these vegetables, but but
Yeah, and ET watching you at the kitchen sink, or me, slicing broccoli was like would probably realize after the first incision that this wasn't meant to heal. It was not a
right,
surgical procedure. Yeah,
exactly. This
the
is
broccoli is
horrific.
probably not going to recover from this operation, right?
But the broccoli is going to be transmigrated because I'm
Right,
going to cook it and I'm going to eat it. It's going to become a part of my body,
right.
therefore a part of my being and my divine soul. So, well, all I'm doing is elevating the I'm just kidding you. I mean, but it's true. I mean, a lot of people believe this. I'm elevating them to a higher level of being by incorporating them into my body. Anyway, so and that's why some people who would otherwise be vegetarians are can justify eating meat. Well, I'm turning that cow into a holy being now, and it's gonna go to heaven with me. Anyway, so so anyway, that I digress. The whole purpose of the mass is to bring about this change of this bread and wine to be the body and blood of Christ. And so, they would have this happening in, their office or their house. And they would all attend and they would all take communion. And even though Helen was not a baptized Catholic, I don't believe. I know Ken was because he was becoming a priest. Uh,
Right.
and I'm pretty sure Bill was not either, which the church, you can't take communion unless you're a baptized Catholic. So Brother Michael was making some, you know, sort of semi-heretical moves there. But, it's just all so funny to me how
It's all
we
pretty
just,
silly, but nothing to feel guilty about, And when we
oh,
learn how absurd this world is, there's nothing worthy of condemnation. It's all worthy of forgiveness. That to me, that's the whole point of looking at all this, clearly and without any condemning undertones or overtones or any tones.
any tones, the
Yeah.
bell tones.
Yeah.
You want me to read? I'll read now.
Sure. Go go
Okay.
go for it.
All right. So, keeping up with her psychological identification as a Catholic, Helen held an exalted opinion of priests and nuns, magically believing that they were more spiritually advanced than others simply by virtue of their vocations. Her experience with this group offered her many opportunities to see the opposite. And yet, on one level at least, she never really abandoned this naive position. This otherwise anomalous attitude, given Helen's great worldly, not to mention otherworldly wisdom, made sense in light of Helen's substitution of form for content, the form of religious life in place of the content of the love of God.
Mhm.
And so she liked to meet many of the nuns and priests with whom I worked, many of whom did express a dedication and commitment to God that the forms of their lives reflected. Occasionally, Helen accompanied me to convents where I would give a talk and counsel sisters, and obviously enjoyed being with people she believed had made a commitment that she consciously was too fearful of doing. I think that's a very, very astute observation Ken made. She was too fearful to actually make that commitment, although she already had made that commitment, and she made
Mhm.
that commitment every time she picked up that notebook. She
Right.
was reaffirming that commitment.
Mhm.
Um, just to be so conflicted is just so sad. Um, but
And hence, once again, back turning the mirror back toward us, that I just need to notice where I'm still ambivalent and conflicted and wishy-washy, and forgive myself for those e- sometimes and often frequent extended lapses in mindfulness, and just realize, well, okay, I'm working on going from hobbyist to adept practitioner, and continuously mindful adept. That's what we're here to do. I mean, to just notice how, as Ken says, notice how miserable choosing the ego has made us, and use that reflection to motivate us to more and more and more consistently choose against the ego, which is then the Holy Spirit's correction is automatically there waiting for us.
that's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up, Bruce, because it really is it. It's not choosing for God, because choosing for God is the natural uh, consequence of choosing against the ego. Choosing for love is the natural consequence for choosing against hate,
Hmm.
against fear. You know, that's and too often we choose for fear, um, because somehow or the other we feel safer if we if we hide ourselves or we're in fearful places. And again just that total insanity. So let's see. So Helen was thus a very closet Christian. The reader may recall Helen's quote guilty secret unquote attitude already present in her childhood. Excuse me, I need to clear my throat really quick here. I didn't want to do that on the mic there. Okay. Helen was thus the reader may recall Helen's guilty secret attitude already present in her childhood when she would sneak out with her Catholic governess to go to church on Sundays. Later, as a married woman, Helen went through a period when she would again sneak out of the house at night while her husband Louis was asleep to walk to St. Patrick's Cathedral to attend the late night services. So devoted was she, at least on one level, that Michael was certain that at the moment of her death, Helen would ask him to baptize her. And Louis's one great fear, as I mentioned in part one, was that he would wake up one morning and find out that Helen had become Catholic.
No, Mr. Bill.
What happened to you? I think that's so funny.
No.
No, because this is all these are all thoughts. These are all thoughts. These are not, there's no change. She didn't cut her hair. She didn't, shave her head or, go into a convent or anything. What would be the difference if she said, today I'm a Catholic compared to today I'm a Jew? What would be the difference in the sum of reality uh, that would cause somebody to become panicked or have a great fear about it? And yet
Hmm.
that's what scares us. Uh, the thought, it's not that you can hurt me, it's the thought. And man, our thoughts are so powerful, and we're so
Amazingly
unaware.
so, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all this whole thing is a kind of a story of denial and it's just pretty crazy. So, all right, so um, he obviously knew what we were doing in my apartment before he joined Helen, Bill, Michael, and me for supper. But characteristic of him, he chose not to pay attention and would accept instead Helen's lame accounts of our quote unquote praying together. There was also Helen's affinity for Mary, called the Blessed Mother by the Catholic Church. While Helen was never shy about sharing her angry feelings toward Jesus or even God, I never once heard her say anything negative about Mary. In fact, she would hardly speak of her at all. And yet there was no question of a strong underlying attraction to the mother of Jesus, regarded by Catholics as the holiest of women. And also, a sidebar, regarded by Muslims as the holiest of women. There's a whole
Interesting.
chapter in the Quran about Mary.
Really?
So that is something a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I wasn't
yeah.
aware of that. Huh.
Yeah, there's stories
Interesting.
about Jesus's childhood in the Quran. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so this attraction can be traced as far back as Helen's experiences as a little girl inside a Catholic church when she accompanied her governess, but had to wait in the vestibule, sneaking glimpses of the quote, beautiful woman dressed in blue, unquote. The experience of quote, God's miracle, unquote, when she was 12 years old, occurred at Lourdes, the place where Mary appeared to little Bernadette in 1858. Interestingly enough, however, one of my first serious talks with Helen did focus on Mary. It came in the summer of 1973 as Helen and I were first becoming acquainted. We spent the day in the Bronx Zoo, and I remember Helen's asking me about Mary and my feelings about her. I
Hmm.
thought that the question had some importance for Helen, and I responded by relating my experiences at the Trappist Abbey of Latrun in Israel, where I felt a very deep connection with Mary through the lovely statue the monks had at the end of the sanctuary. It was a connection I found quite odd, since growing up Jewish, I had no background in Marian devotion. In fact, my very favorite part of each day in the monastery came at the close, when the last thing the monks would chant before retiring was the hauntingly beautiful Trappist Gregorian hymn, Salve Regina, Hail Holy Queen. We would all kneel in the darkened church with the only visible light emanating from the larger than life statue of Mary. It was always a special moment for me. I shared these experiences with Helen, who was fascinated by it all. However, because Jesus was always the specific object of my spiritual experience and not Mary, we never really discussed the subject again.
Hmm.
Moreover, the clear ambivalence of Helen's relationship with Jesus seemed to require more attention. If I had pursued the subject of Mary, I am sure Helen would have spoken much more about her own feelings and experiences of her, and probably these discussions would have stimulated more poems with Marian themes than she took down. Excuse me. A lot of people now, just sidebar again, there is a great movement devotion toward Mary right now. And Mary, both Mother of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and a lot of modern day, prophets or whatever are seeing and speaking with the Marys and have messages. And this is very interesting because of course, again, this is all happening in our own mind, and so it's the thought you're contacting the actual mother of Jesus. Well, I guess that's all inside of us as well. We
Mhm.
are the mother of Jesus. There's only
Yeah.
one of us here, so we get to play all the
Hmm.
parts.
Yep. Yep. Whole cast of characters is inside our mind.
That's right. And
Yeah.
we're playing every part. And
Yeah.
you know that because go to sleep and have a dream. In the dream, there are many characters. When you wake up, who all was there? None of them. They were all in your mind. And that's the same thing here. So
Mhm.
here we are
Yeah.
in the dream world. All right. So, thus there was in Helen, on one level, the usual Catholic mentality of venerating Mary, especially in saying the Rosary. But there was a deeper level in Helen as well. During the scribing of A Course in Miracles, Jesus made occasional references to Mary, comparing Helen to her in terms of function. Mary's bringing forth the person of Jesus. Helen's bringing forth his message through A Course in Miracles with intimations of the same degree of holiness. In one short special message to Helen, probably dictated in 1978, Jesus began with the words, "Peace, Mother." It was always clear to heaven, by the way, to Helen, heaven, Helen, by the way, that in no way was she an incarnation of Mary. She knew that Jesus was referring to content, not form. And we know that because Mary ascended whole body into heaven on August 15th. So there's no Mary running around here. Uh,
Okay, I missed that news bulletin, but that's
yeah, yeah.
quite all right.
Well, you got to follow the Catholic liturgical calendar.
Okay.
You know that. So
Okay. Well, I
yeah,
guess I out of
and
that loop.
unlike Jesus, who actually died and then reconstructed a body, and that body was risen up to Mary never even died. She just went straight up bodily into heaven. So she's not running around in incarnations now. Uh, just just to clear that point.
Okay.
All right. There were thus imitations, as just stated, that intimations, as just stated, that Helen shared the same inner radiance and purity as did Mary, and likewise that Helen was intimately one with Jesus, as intimately one with Jesus as was Mary. And so we can say that the figure of Mary, the mother of Jesus, would not only be comparable, but identical in content to the ancient priestess of Helen's vision. The mind of God's Son is one. And so each of us carries within us this quote, capital T, thought of the absolute purity of Christ that the historical figures of Mary represent, figures of Jesus and Mary represent. In the various messages and inner experiences Helen had, Jesus was helping her to identify once again with the love that was her true self. Again, Jesus trying to reinforce in her that she's a divine being and
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
she's not a woman and a person and a professor and a this and that. She's actually a divine being that is fully capable of perfect peace and seeing
Once
that.
again, we
Yeah,
can turn the mirror back
yeah,
on ourselves who are reading this, and it's like, well, that's what's calling to us. That part of our self that we think is a part, but it's really the totality of our real identity. And we're learning to dis um, disregard the after we look at it and see the nothingness of what we made, that fraudulent part of our mind that we call ego, and see that it's has never served us, isn't serving us now, never will, and given that historical and future track record and current of zero effectivity, um, we can see that our real identity has never failed except in our persistent wanting to stay asleep and dream.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
in our own imagination, the story that we make up that somehow or the other we would prefer to believe than the fact that we're the one that made the story up. If
Yeah.
if I
Yep. Yep.
this is so silly.
Hmm.
All right, let's see. We got, oh yeah. Okay. So I continue. An extremely powerful and important vision Helen had of Mary reflects the great respect, if not love, she had for this woman, who is every bit the equal of Jesus. It was a vision of Michelangelo's great statue, the Pietà, which depicts Mary holding the crumpled and dead body of her son. Helen saw this figure of Mary in front of her and heard her say, "This means nothing."
Mhm.
Imagine the depth of love and spiritual awareness that would allow a mother to say these words and fully mean them. The figure of Mary represented the same content for Helen as did the priestess of her earlier vision, not to mention the quote past life image of Helen as an ancient priestess who was barely in the world, remaining at its edge, healing those who were brought to her. I think it is safe to state that for Helen, Mary represented a being who shared the same rarefied mind as did Jesus, and was probably one of the very, very few who truly understood his message. It is a mind, as I shall discuss in the epilogue, that Helen, on another level, also shared.
Mhm.
And there we are looking at this on the one level this appears to be just wow, interesting, wow, beautiful writing, great teaching, blah blah blah, but in reality we know that this is true,
Yep.
and that,
Yep.
I mean, it just shifts everything. And again, that's the purpose of these particular lessons that we're doing, is to reach that higher level of the mind where our reality actually exists, and we are that divine being that has been, we've always been, we've never changed, and yet here we are. All right, let's see.
Seemingly anchored and, if you will, crucified by the crosshairs of space and time into a dream of specifics, and yet the abstract, all-inclusive, all-encompassing oneness of our right mind is our real nature and our real identity that we've somehow managed to ignore for a pretty extended period. Yeah, yeah,
And still continue.
yeah, yeah. But
uh, but
it'll pass.
every little reminder. So do you want to read
Sure. We're on
a number of
uh,
poems?
and yeah, a number of poems likewise make reference to Mary, although some of these are admittedly strange references, to say the least. The first of these, quote, Mother of the World, unquote, was written on February 23rd, 1974, along with two other poems that related to Jesus. Helen originally called the poem, quote, Earth Mother, unquote, but we realized afterwards that the pagan connotations of this term ill-fitted the poem, and so we changed it first to Holy Mother, and then to its present title, Mother of the World. Here it is in its entirety, and this is from The Gifts of God, page 84. Peace is a woman, mother to the world, whom God has sent to lay a gentle hand across 1,000 children's fevered brows. In its cool certainty there is no fear, and from her breast there comes a quietness for them to lean against and to be still. She brings a message to their frightened hearts from Him who sent her. Listen now to her who is your mother in your Father's name. Do not attend the voices of the world. Do not attempt to crucify again my firstborn son and brother still to you. Heaven is in her eyes because she looked upon this son who was the first. And now she looks to you to find him once again. Do not deny the mother of the world, the only thing she ever wants to see, for it is all you ever want to find. Well, that's it. That innocence, that perfect unconditional acceptance and unwavering kindness is, all we want to find, not only within everything that we experience that seems to be outside, but also from within ourselves to share. Very nice. Any comments on that, Lynn?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm just thinking, I don't recall having read much about Helen's mother being affectionate to her or loving to her, except when she was pretending to be sick. Or when she was being sick, that her mother would come and hold her and all that kind of stuff. But I would imagine a person she had to have had a longing for that experience to have with a mother. So I think that this is really evocative of what she expected of her mother, what she expects of a mother, and maybe what she expected of herself as a mother of a course. I don't know. It's
Hmm. There you go. Yeah, I'd never really given much thought to Helen's biological parents, but being the mother, figuratively the mother of the course, is certainly something that would make sense, huh?
yeah, and
Yeah.
because she didn't have any children, but she had all the children that she worked with, whom I'm sure
Hmm.
she was affectionate and motherly towards.
Right, right.
Because it appeared that, and there was that young girl that they met at the was it at the airport, that young lady.
Right,
And
right.
I mean,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
she was mothering people. She mothered Ken, she mothered John
Hmm.
Bundy. She probably mothered Bill. um she was really being a mother the whole time, and maybe just trying to be the mother that she wanted to have. I don't know.
Hmm. Well, certainly all of us have been under her metaphoric wing, if you think of her as, the channel through which that mothering arrived, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think we don't see her that way. We don't see her, the loving, she was doing it for a reason. She wasn't just doing it because she felt forced by Jesus to write this stuff down.
No, I think there was an agreement, but not any coercion at all.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So anyway, interesting. So do you want me to read?
Sure.
Okay. So after the opening stanzas reference to an almost archetypical art I should have
Archetypal.
archetypal mother, the second and third stanzas are clear allusions to Mary, the mother of Jesus. These stanzas also carry along with them the fervent appeal to listen to the mother's call for peace, and for us frightened children to be like Jesus, her firstborn son. And so I was saying, like feeling like you were being held in the arms of the mother, the Holy Mother, if that makes any sense to you. One of Helen's last poems, written on New Year's Day, 1978, is The Resurrection and the Life. It is an odd poem indeed and combines both the Christmas and Easter messages. It has 7 stanzas, but in one sense is actually 2 poems, and Helen specifically asked that only the first 4 stanzas be printed as the actual poem. The poem, unfortunately, was printed in its entirety. Wonder how that happened. Uh, in spite of Helen wanting it a certain way. Helen, in fact, had asked me to draw a line between these 2 poems, stanzas 1 through 4 and 5 through 7, on the sheets on which we originally typed them, reflecting the clear distinction in her mind between the two. Structurally, however, they are similar, as each stanza shares the same number of lines and rhyme scheme: A, B, C, B, D, B. This first poem is a beautiful Christmas and Easter message, as seen in the second stanza. And this is the first poem. So still the birth you did not understand, who came to you before your frightened eyes, the Lord of light and life appears to fail, his promises of heaven's grace, and dies forever on a cross, nor can you see the child of hope who in a manger lies. It's from the Gifts of God, page 100. And it ends, Ken continues, and it ends with this exhortation for Helen to look upon Jesus' resurrected life. And then look again on him and join his benediction. It is done. The second poem not only combines Christmas and Easter themes, but also images of Helen and Mary, Jesus, and Christ. He held you in his arms as he arose, and death was overcome. Yet on the hill of dying, you had fixed your eyes, it seemed, as if forever. Now you wait until you look beyond the end you thought you saw, and see the child who is your firstborn still. Think of this child who comes again. He is the son who seemed to die. He offers you the motherhood the shadow of a cross appeared to take away. Yet round it grew the lilies of rebirth. Oh, yet round it grew the lilies of rebirth. Accept again the deathless one, the holy Son you knew. See not an ending where beginning is, nor dark in sunlight. You who came to mourn, remember now the ancient song of birth, and lay aside the signs of grieving worn by childless mothers. Lift your heart to him, for once again to you a child is born.
Mhm.
That's from the Gifts of God's page 100 and 101. I don't know, here we're talking about these childless mothers. It's very interesting. Um, because that definitely was Helen.
And whether it's a childless mother or a motherless child, the whole idea of abandonment implies separation, and so the course is there to promote the healing that we believe that that in separation, so we need our minds healed, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Ken says this poem made Helen most uncomfortable, as did its companion, Mother of the World. It was a discomfort born of the ego fear of the self beyond both heaven and Helen. The self identified with the ancient priestess, and here with Mary. The call of the poem was for Helen to identify with this self and remember that within her holy mind was indeed reborn the holy child of Christ. Her function as scribe to Jesus, giving birth to this course, was merely the reflection of this more abstract birth of the presence of Christ in her mind. The holy message of resurrection and rebirth is understood in A Course of Miracles as the awakening from the dream of death to the truth of Christ's ongoing birth in our minds. Let's see, as Christmas lesson 303 states, the Holy Christ is born in me today. And let's see, I'm not sure, we got about 4 or 5 minutes. I don't know if you have to leave early or anything, but you want
Oh,
me to?
I could read that last poem.
Okay, why
Okay.
don't we let you do
Yeah.
that?
Two other poems, Stabat Mater and Waiting, carry with them a suggestion of Mary in a theme immortalized in the great church hymns as Stabat Mater, in quotes, the Mother Mary, and in John's Gospel, who stands sadly beneath the cross. Here then, Mary is seen as an ego symbol of hopelessness and despair. Helen's, quote, Stabat Mater, unquote, poem conveys this hopelessness of believing that the love of God has indeed been killed by the ego's hatred and fear. The poem begins and ends this way. Who stands beside a cross is all alone, for sorrow such as this cannot be shared. She stands upon the edge of eons without hope. Here is forever, here is timelessness. Who could believe the time of dying ends? And that's from the Gifts of God, page 92. And Ken says, after Helen wrote down this poem, Also, it should be noted at Christmas time, I wrote her a similar poem, but with a different ending. See Stabat Mater 2. So why don't we wrap it up there and then pick up next week? That sound good?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Oh, likewise, Lynn. Always enjoy sharing the hour with you and hearing Ken's insights and what a great couple of years. I think we're coming up on reading this book.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
getting close to
fingers
finishing.
crossed.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, have a great week and look forward to the next conversation.
All right. Thank you so much, Bruce Rawles, and we'll see you next week.